I'm Rita Kakati-Shah. I'm your host for the Uma Show. Welcome to your one-stop journey for feeling empowered. We're a platform for change. We build confidence. We are your voice. We want you to be bold, be you, be Uma. Today, we are exploring diversity and inclusion in the newsroom. And I'm so excited to be joined by today's goddess of go-getting, Nina Goswami, who is not only the creative diversity lead at the BBC, but she's also a fellow Assamese from London. Welcome, Nina.
Hi.
So I'm going to start off by saying Gi Khobar, which is an Assamese greeting, as you know, and it's so lovely to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's wonderful to see you as well. Kikobo to you as well.
So I love the fact that you're from London, you have Assamese heritage, you've always had a knack for writing as well. So just tell us a little bit about your upbringing and who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, obviously, you know a lot about me already, Rita. I probably know a few things about you that I won't be telling your audience members. Yeah, as you say, born and brought up in London. My parents came over in the 60s from Assam. And as you know, well, we both grew up together in London. And we were really fortunate, I think, that, you know, our parents, as first generation in this country, stayed together. And so it meant that obviously we got to celebrate Assamese culture. So we have the Bihu every year, kind of April time, which was always really, really fantastic. And you know,
wasn't that so much fun?
Absolutely. It was a shame we couldn't hold it this year because of COVID. But you know, that's been going on now for 30, 40 years, isn't it? Which is absolutely amazing. I always remember one of our uncles, as we call them, don't we? Uncle Sigda dressing up as Santa Claus when we were kids at Christmas time. But it was a really great sense of community. And what I really loved was that, you know, we got to embrace our Assamese heritage, but we also embraced British heritage as well. And our parents together as a collective were really, I think, really keen on making sure that we had that dual heritage. And I think that was absolutely fantastic.
Wasn't it so powerful, wasn't it? Just having that dual sort of upbringing, Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you talk about my writing, one of the things that really influenced, you know, where I am today, of course, are my parents. So I've got quite a long story, but I'm going to tell it anyway, about kind of how I ended up in journalism. And it really was down to my dad, funnily enough. So, you know, my brother's 11 years older than I am. And so this is when I was about 7, 8 years old. We're all sitting around the kitchen table. We're all talking about his future. Is he going to go to university? Obviously, he's Indian. But, you know, what's he going to do with himself? That kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, there was like silence at the kitchen table. And we had the telly on in the background. And it was the BBC 6 o'clock news on at the time, which is the UK's TV national news bulletin, which goes on our national. And Maurice Stewart was presenting, and my dad turned around and said, I can see you doing that one day. And I was like, oh, it's me at 7. Going, oh, that's interesting. Well, the idea of presenting went away, but the idea of journalism stayed with me. And that's really kind of the beginning of me kind of looking at, researching, thinking about what I could do. But it was actually my mum who was the one who started me off on the track. And that was from a little fair that we have in our area. She bumped into the local council press officer who, I was about 15 at this time, who, unbeknownst to her and also to me, my mum had managed to get me work experience for that summer at my local council press office. And then literally that was the beginning of my career. From there, local paper connections and so on. So yeah, really interesting.
I love that. And because I remember, like, you know, going back from a Bihu perspective, you were our correspondence communication secretary. So you used to write everything for us, all of our copy, everything was basically Nina writing it. So very familiar with all of that. But yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know actually how much of an influence actually your parents had in that. So thanks for sharing. And obviously that started off your path in journalism, eventually in media, which you've actually spent your pretty much your entire professional career, and you've even had stints at the Sunday Times and the Sunday Telegraph as well, haven't you? I imagine that must have been pretty hectic. Could you share a little bit about your experiences there?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was really fortunate. So it was through those connections I was saying that I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship at the Sunday Times. So they were the ones who actually trained me up as a fully fledged journalist. So it's just off the back of my law degree. Yeah, it was really interesting. So I think for me, I was a cub reporter, as they call them. So I was learning my trade with the Sunday Times. So everything was a new experience. But the moment of real excitement was my first ever front page, and that was now 16 years ago. So I suppose that gives you an idea of how old I am. Hopefully, I don't look it.
You're younger than I am, so it's fine.
16 years ago to get that first front page. And what was amazing about that, it was about the human cost of MMR, so the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine. So at this time in our history, as it is history now, there was a scare around the use of the MMR jab, which was from these diseases. The result of people not taking that jab was that people who couldn't take that jab were being affected. And I uncovered the two of the first people who were badly affected by the fact that there was no herd immunization from MMR, and how these people have now been severely affected for the rest of their lives. And that was a really amazing moment because it changed what the government did and how they were reacting to MMR. So that was the power of what we were doing. And one of the things as well as being a young junior reporter is that they always send you off to do all the undercover work. And so that was a real experience, learning to be someone else for a couple of weeks. And so it really was. So when I was at the Sunday Telegraph, one of the stories I always remember was when I was undercover as a missing script investigator. So I know. So this was for the exam board, OCR. So I went along and spent 2 weeks undercover there. Literally, the job was you get phone calls from people saying, oh, this script is missing, or a phone call from the post office saying, oh, we've lost X, Y, and Z. Anyway, I was there for 2 weeks. They'd lost 10,000 scripts. And this was for GCSE and A levels students at the time. And so that was a big story for us. And
wow.
Again, it changed something in the way that the system worked. So, it was that kind of journalism that really I was really proud of.
Yeah, and that was quite amazing, actually. Kind of a bit James Bond-like, isn't it? Like you kind of get into these sort of sleuthy situations. I love it, yeah. And then sort of fast forward really from that love of journalism and your experiences, then you ended up joining the BBC, didn't you? Where you became a senior producer for BBC News. And now as a fan of the BBC News, from an audience perspective, we just get to watch what's shown on the TV, we react and when we learn from it. However, there's an entire world of production that goes on behind the scenes, isn't there? Tell us a little bit about that and how it all comes together.
Yeah. I always like to think of these kind of analogies of, have you heard the one about, the swan? So, the swan on the surface looks pristine and gliding along the water, whereas underneath the legs are going and it's chaos. That's a little bit like what we are. Well, when there's breaking news, that's definitely what we're like. But, we have a structure, and that's why we can react really quickly to things that are happening. We have the editor of the day who is in charge of, the output, and they're the ones who are assigning us, if that's the role I'm doing that day. Sometimes I am the editor. The story that we're going to be looking after. And I was thinking about this the other day because someone asked me this. I think, say for a half-hour programme that goes out on BBC One, there's probably about 60 people on the day who are directly involved in that programme. But
wow.
around that, you've got the planning people beforehand and afterwards, and there are other things that need to be done. So you're looking to nearly 100 people who would have been involved in a TV production for a half-hour program. So you can kind of think about in a half-hour program, there's normally about 8 stories that we'll be covering. It might be that they're all COVID related, but there'll be still 8 different stories. And so you'll have 8 correspondents, you'd have 8 producers. So the producers would be the people behind the camera who are either working in the newsroom itself, so they're the kind of the liaison linchpin between the editor of the day and the team that are out on the ground. And then you have a producer out on the ground as well, then you have the camera crew. And so all these different parts, but that's just to make one story. So you're doing that 8 times. You've got someone who's writing the scripts, you've got the presenter who's coming in, you've got someone cutting headlines, then you've got the people in the gallery, you've got the director, auto cue, camera operators, floor managers, makeup artists, you know, the list goes on. So you can see.
Incredible. I'm like, wow.
So the logistics are really, they're quite complex, but you know, you work together so much as a team, you kind of end up in this rhythm, and to say, as a result, when something does break, you know how to react because you are together as a team, and that's really great.
Yeah, no, that sounds an incredible bond, actually. I guess you get to really know everyone really, really well, especially after that much intensity during the day, every day, I think. Yeah. And also, like, you're quite in charge of different pieces of content, aren't you, as well? And I think you've always been a bit of a firm believer, really, that whether it's content on air or wherever, it should always be representative of the true diversity of the society that we live in. So tell us a bit more about your current role as BBC's creative diversity lead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, as you know, I have a passion for making sure that audiences are getting educated. Like you mentioned education, I think that's a really important thing. So, you know, audiences are seeing society as it is, and so getting educated along the way as a result of that. And so my role as creative diversity lead is all about that. It's about looking at our content and seeing how can we make sure that it's reflective of society. I also think about it in the sense of, you know, we can only be what we see. So, you know, when we were growing up, Moira Stewart was the only Black female presenter for the news. So she was our only role model for anyone who wanted to go into journalism. Now we have Rita Chakrabarti, Michelle Hussein. You know, we've got so many new faces, and that's great to see that news has changed over time. But there is so much more to do in terms of representation. And one of the things that we do is the 50/50 project. So I'd be keen to tell you all about that if you're up for a
I'm actually going to ask you, because actually that's a really good segue, because it's not just called the 50/50 project, but you've actually won multiple awards for the 50/50 project, which is, I believe it's the biggest collective action on increasing women's representation in BBC content that there's ever been, which is that's just incredible. And so do tell us all about it. Really want to hear about it. So
yeah, it's my favorite story, so which is why I would love to hop on about it for you. So
please do.
So it's basically the 50/50 project, as you say, started as it started about women's representation, and it actually started with us as journalists and in the London newsroom. So I'll hark back to Christmas 2016, and Ros Atkins, he is the presenter of the BBC World TV news programme called Outside Source. And he was heading to Cornwall, which is about 3 and a bit hours, is it? Probably a bit more than that, outside of London. And he was listening to one of our radio stations, which I will not name. For obvious reasons. And for an hour, he didn't hear a single female voice on that radio station. And in 2016, he was saying to himself, how can that be? How can that be the situation that you don't hear a woman's voice for an hour on one of the biggest radio stations in the UK? And so it got him thinking over the Christmas period. And when he came back to London and started talking to his team, he'd come up with an idea. And it's such a simple idea. It's just to count the number of men and the number of women on the programme that we control. And that's important. I'll explain why in a minute. To see if you can reach 50% women by the end of the month. And so the reason why the control element is important is that, we as journalists don't have control over the fact that the Prime Minister of Britain at the moment is Boris Johnson. And we didn't have control over the fact that it was Theresa May before him. So we don't count them in our count. We only count what we as journalists and content makers are able to change. So that would be like political commentators, or economists, or if we're doing a piece of investigative journalism, then everything would count because we control everything in that story. Right. And so we're trying to reach it over a 50% over a month period, because we understand also that there's ebbs and flows in the news cycle. So as it stands at the moment, politics is very male dominated. So if we're doing a Brexit story, we know we're going to have more men on our programme than we are women. However, if we're doing something about healthcare, the likelihood is that it might be that there's more women on it. So therefore, you're looking at that ebb and flow. So that's why we do it over a set period of time. Anyway, that was one programme. They proved that over a 4-month period that they could reach 50% women. And then what happened is that started to spread across the newsroom. We all started hearing about it and decided just to do it ourselves. So none of this was organised by the BBC. This was all from the journalists and the content makers themselves, wanting to make a change, understanding that, we need to be representing society properly. And then in the end, there was 80 teams who were involved. This is all word of mouth, and also Ros Atkins himself kind of going along and kind of doing some salesmanship. But our then Director General, Tony Hall, heard about it. And
that's
then
amazing. 80 teams, you said? That's 80?
80 teams. And this was just, word of mouth. It wasn't like organised by the corporation or anything like that. But then the moment it accelerated was the moment that our Director General, the big boss of the BBC, who was then Tony Hall, heard about the project. And he went, right, love this. We're going to start a challenge. We're going to see how many teams across the BBC can do it. And one of the beauties of this project is that it is voluntary. So we know that the people who are involved want to create the change. Anyway, let's fast forward now to 2020. There are now 600 teams across the BBC involved. It's brilliant. I mean, I just genuinely, I can't believe it. From just one team doing some spread, and a couple of numbers on a spreadsheet, to now 600 teams across the BBC, not only in news, but, we have orchestras now using 50-50 in music and understanding, we implement and change the methodology depending on what we need to monitor, essentially. And we're just making that change across the board.
That's amazing.
So, it's really exciting.
Yeah, and you've been sort of now getting other organisations to kind of follow suit and partner as well, haven't you? How's that been?
Yeah, so so again, from this little small thing to where we are now,
isn't it?
I have to pinch myself. I just think, I'm a journalist. I don't really know much about all this stuff, but here we go. 72 organisations as of this week are now part of 50-50, and that's in 22 countries. So we have public service broadcasters across the globe now involved, but we also have academic institutions using 50-50 in their actual coursework or when they're doing news days. We have corporate organisations like Unilever who are on board using it in their communications. So when they're looking at their spokespeople that they're putting up, we have PR companies also involved. So again, looking at, when they write a press release, are they being balanced in who they're quoting? The FT, Financial Times, ABC Australia. I could, well, I'm not going to list all 72 for you.
But that's amazing. Though. The fact is, it's gone viral in a way for good reasons. And it's not just in the UK, it's not just in the States, it's all over the world, it sounds like. And it's crossing industries as well, which is amazing. Because you've always had traditional industries that you think, okay, well, they might be more susceptible to kind of partnering up. But then you go into different industries too. Like you've been going to music and sort of just different fields, which is actually so powerful out there. So
yeah, one of the things that we were thinking about when we started asking other organisations outside media if they were interested in having a go and trying it was that essentially, you know, if we as the media are trying to make sure that society is representative from our perspective, i.e. on TV, radio and on our digital content, then the people who are being offered to us as spokespeople, as experts, as the stories need to also be reflective of society. And so by getting other organisations outside the media to think about this and to think about the talent that's in their own organisations and putting them forward, then, you know, we're able to kind of have a more holistic approach to making sure that our content is reflective of society.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think to your point, and going back to where we first started talking about just educating the population and say when you were that 7-year-old self, when I was a child, with my brother's child, my kids now grown up, when they watch the TV, they watch who they think they want to be. And now they're seeing people that we didn't get to see. So I think this is a really, really special time. And I think that thanks to the 50/50 project really for doing this, because it's really spearheading something that's really taken so many industries by storm. So I love it, you know. And in fact, you guys have been so successful that you're now branching into other areas as well, aren't you? You're looking into, I think, disability and ethnicity, aren't you? Tell us a little bit about that. That's super exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're so excited about this. So, you know, we've learned so much from improving women's representation, and there's so much that can translate from what we've learned over to improving representation for other groups. And so race and disability are the two that we're focusing on now. So we're taking those kind of core principles that we've learned from women's representation and translating it over. So those three core principles are data to affect change. So we're still monitoring, we're still going to be looking to reach a certain target over a set period of time. Measure what you control, of course, most important, as I say. And then the key thing, and this is one really for our content makers, is that the best content must always get on air. So that means the best contributor. So we don't want people on just because they're a woman, just because they're Indian, just because they have a disability. We want them on because they are the expert in the area that they're talking about. And so that's the real key driver, so that we want to make sure that every voice is heard in an everyday way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that must be quite interesting to juggle for you, actually, doing that. So what have been some lessons learned along the way?
I think lessons learned loads. I'm trying to think where to start. I mean, I think the biggest thing that we've been looking at is, you know, creating momentum and a true kind of spirit of collaboration. That's the thing that's really, really worked. And it's been amazing. I think when we first started this project, one of the things that people might think about with journalists is that, you know, we have a contacts book and we don't share it. And, you know, it's, you know, that was a real kind of thing, actually, when I first started in journalism. And by doing that, we stopped diversity. And one of the things that's been really interesting in this project is the amount that people share in terms of experts and contributors across platforms now. And that's been great. And seeing actually that there is that within us as an industry. So that collaboration has been brilliant. But it has been, how do you get people to change their mindset? And that's been very interesting. So one of the great things about 50/50 is that we started with people who are passionate about creating change. And then when others see that change is possible, that helps bring them over to try and make the change themselves. And so having that mindset change is that kind of peer-to-peer dynamic And that's been really, really powerful. And so when we started the ethnicity and disability pilot, what was really interesting, we thought that we would have to start from scratch like we did with women, going around, doing a bit of a hustle, saying, yeah, you want to have a go. Whereas this time, we just put out an email and saying, does anyone have a go at piloting 50-50 for ethnicity and disability? And we have over 55 teams across the BBC piloting it, which is amazing. That shows that there's a mindset change happening within the BBC. And that's really exciting to see.
No, that sounds really great. And I think there'll also probably be some crossover as well, because from the pool that said, okay, we're going to sign up for the women part of the project, I'm guessing some of them anyway might have come from different ethnic backgrounds or had disabilities as well. So by default of that, there might be some crossover. So I think that's just, so it's super brilliant about doing all this. But I think I agree with you. It's all about changing mindsets, really. And trying to have those conversations, sometimes difficult ones, to get people to just hear different points of view. And you can't do that unless you show people from different backgrounds, but not just show them, actually show their lives and let them deliver the message as well. So I think that's brilliant, the way you're doing that. Wonderful. So what's next on the horizon for you, professionally and personally as well?
Oh, personally, I think about that one. Professionally, that was an easier one to...
We'll come back to personally.
Yeah. Professionally, I have one mission, and that is to create content that is representative of society. It's about, helping to give that different perspective, as you say, kind of getting our content makers to think differently and embrace change, and take and have the permission to try something that perhaps is outside of their comfort zone. My team, we call it happy fail. So, try it, see what happens. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be the end of the world. So just that continued mission of improving that representation so that we have a media that is reflective of society, so that our children, as you say, can see themselves and what they could be in the future. And that to me just makes me really excited every time I think about the mission, and seeing how actually it's doable. We can do this. I suppose for me it's about downtime, because since lockdown in March, it's been hectic, really. I've been back in the newsroom helping with critical core services to make sure that the news does get on air. And I've been doing that on top of the day job as creative diversity lead. So I'm pretty much looking forward to a break. And actually, quite lucky where I'm off to Snowdonia, which is a mountain in Wales, in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So a bit of walking, a bit of fresh air. So I'm really looking forward to that. But frankly, I think, what we all need, because it is in flux at the moment in terms of, what's life like? Yeah. So, in a post-COVID world, when we find this kind of new normal, as people call it, I'm just hoping to find a little bit more zen, I think. I think that's what
we'll do with a bit of that. Oh, I love it. So final words, what advice would you give to any of your viewers or any sort of budding journalists who kind of want to follow in your footsteps, want to go into journalism, media, or really want to just make a difference in society?
So on the media front, I think the biggest thing is about showing your passion for journalism, or if you're interested in creative industry, showing your passion for the content that you're interested in creating. So, portfolios are big, let's put it that way. So, writing blogs. I used to volunteer at my local hospital radio station. So if you've got a local volunteering radio station, something like that, work experience, it's just building up that kind of evidence base that, this is the thing that you really, really love and that you really want to do. I mean, these days as well, it's easier to edit videos together, phones is such good quality in terms of video that you can just go and film your own video and edit it together, and it just shows the skill set that you have. So doing that is probably number one, and then number two is building contacts. This industry is all based around who you know. You know, making sure that you're kind of connecting with people, and people are really willing to connect. I mean, I promise you, we're not scary people. LinkedIn is a great source for that. Other social media does exist, as we say, but it's a really great source of information. And obviously, from a BBC perspective, there's the BBC Academy with loads of information on there about how you can get into the industry, and BBC Careers website. But yeah, so it's those kind of ideas really. And then in terms of making a difference in society, I think we can all do that. Everyone has the ability to make difference. For me, it's really about championing voices. It's about making sure underrepresented people get heard. And we can all do that. You know, I don't know, there's someone you might know who's done something really brilliantly. It might be something that seems small and incidental, but shout about it. You know, that will give them the confidence to put themselves forward for things. And I think, you know, that's a real gift that we can all give.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Nina, that your incredible journey and those really wise words. So Nina Goswami, Creative Diversity Lead at the BBC, thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers for joining us today on this empowerment journey. We want you all to embrace that inner goddess of go-getting. We want you all to be bold, be you, be Uma.